right. You see folks coming in from the Zoom waiting room. Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We are joined by an incredible panel of folks this afternoon and really appreciate everyone making the time. Last month, the White House announced the first slate of Article 3 judicial nominees, and among them are a handful of anti-abortion extremists with long and dangerous records of attacking reproductive freedom. Tomorrow, June 4th, the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to hold confirmation hearings for some of these nominees, and if they are advanced out of that committee, confirmation votes before the full Senate could come as soon as next month. Today, we are joined by storytellers, advocates, and experts to discuss what is at stake as Trump and his allies work to stack the federal bench with even more loyalists who hold radical and dangerous views about reproductive freedom and unchecked government power. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Mini Timmaraju, the president and CEO of Reproductive Freedom for All.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Thanks for everyone who joined us today. As mentioned, I'm going to talk about three of the Trump judicial nominees, Whitney Hermandorfer, Joshua Devine, and Maria Lanahan, and the grave threat they pose to reproductive freedom. And it's no exaggeration to state that each of these judicial picks are anti-abortion, Trump loyalists who will help dismantle our democracy if confirmed. And the record on abortion is a clear indication that this administration is in fact seeking to eliminate abortion access nationwide, despite Trump's false campaign narrative promises that he wouldn't do so. He said that because he knew that it was an incredibly unpopular position to take, banning abortion, and yet we're seeing it happen in real time through these types of nominations. So, starting with Whitney Hermandorfer, Trump's pick for the Sixth Circuit, she served as lead counsel in a case defending Tennessee's total abortion ban. She also challenged HHS's rule requiring providers who receive federal Title X funding to give patients information about abortion. Hermandorfer has fought against LGBTQ plus equality at every chance she's had. She represented Tennessee lawsuits opposing Title IX and Title VIII protections for transgender people from discrimination and supported bans on gender-affirming care for youth. Next, we have Joshua Devine, one of Trump's picks for U.S. District Court in Missouri. He's currently representing Missouri in Missouri versus FDA, the latest challenge against access to mifepristone, a pill commonly used in abortion care and miscarriage management. If Devine succeeds in forcing the FDA to remove its 25-year approval of mifepristone, or alternatively, impose medically unnecessary restrictions, it could result in millions losing abortion access, including in states that do not have abortion bans, where abortion access is legal. More than 60% of all abortion care is with mifepristone. And then there's Maria Lanahan, another pick for a U.S. District Court seat in Missouri. She's also part of the effort to ban mifepristone. Lanahan argued that medication abortion is unsafe. Not true, despite decades of peer-reviewed research providing that mifepristone is safer than most over-the-counter drugs, including Tylenol. And all of these nominees have ties to Leonard Leo and the ultra-conservative groups, the Federalist Society and the Tenio Network. And as we saw in 2022, when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, Trump's judicial nominees, they can make or break access to reproductive health care. From district courts to circuit courts to the Supreme Court, the plan is clear. Donald Trump wants to stack the judiciary with extremists who will work together at every level to decimate abortion access. And the damage that Donald Trump does today could reverberate for a lifetime. The average age of Trump's first slate of nominees is just 39 years old. That means if they're confirmed to these lifetime appointments, they will shape the future of reproductive freedom for decades. And that's why the Senate must unequivocally reject these extremists, each one worse than the last, who pose an urgent threat to our freedoms and democracy. And with that, I'm going to introduce Carrie Frail, a patient storyteller and a veteran from Missouri.
Thank you so much. My name is Carrie Frail. I'm an Air Force veteran. I'm a mother of two, and I'm a Missouri resident. I live in St. Louis. And I'm here today to speak out against extremist judges that Trump and the Republicans are attempting to have confirmed. I'm here because I had an abortion that saved my life. Now the right to an abortion is under attack everywhere, including in Missouri, where the right to abortion has once again been stripped away by extremist judges after Missourians voted to protect our right to bodily autonomy. I joined the Air Force when I was only 18. I raised my right hand and swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and the rights and freedoms of everyone. I had two children while serving, and eventually I settled in St. Louis with my family after separating from the service. Years later, my ex-husband, and I divorced. I began dating, I fell in love with, and later became pregnant by a man who emotionally, verbally, and physically abused me over the course of our 5-year relationship. I initially wanted to keep our baby, but he insisted that I have an abortion, going so far as to threaten me with bodily harm in an attempt to cause me to have a miscarriage. I agreed to an abortion. It was early enough in my pregnancy that I was able to obtain a medication abortion at Planned Parenthood in St. Louis, Missouri. I firmly believe that if I had not had an abortion, I never would have been able to make a clean break and escape my abusive ex. I never would have been able to cut contact with him, and likely he would have killed me. My abortion allowed me to escape, and I'm grateful to this day. I truly believe that my abortion saved my life, and I know that I'm not the only Missourian or American who has a story like this. After the Dobbs decision, Missouri was the first state to ban abortion. In the wake of that, Missourians worked tirelessly to protect abortion by ballot initiative, passing it into law in 2024. Now, extremist judges in Missouri have already overturned the will of the people, banning abortion once again in the state. It is vital that we stand up against these extremist judicial nominees now. Every new slot filled by a Trump nominee chips away at our constitutionally protected rights. We need to encourage senators on the Judicial Subcommittee to reject extremist judges like Joshua Devine and Maria Lanahan. It can mean the difference between democracy and autocracy. It can mean the difference between the rule of law being followed and having it be broken. It can mean the difference between life and death. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Nikki B. Zeit, an OBGYN and educator based in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Thank you. As mentioned, I am a practicing OBGYN and also a researcher and educator in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've been practicing in Knoxville, Tennessee since 2004. So I've seen years and years of access to abortion care taken away and the consequences that that has on my patients and the learners that I'm trying to teach the full spectrum of OBGYN care. They understand why it is important for them to learn that care and desire the training. But unfortunately, legislators and judges are making it harder and harder for us to provide the care and train our learners to continue to provide this life-saving care. Just some brief examples since the almost 3 years that we've not been able to educate or provide the care. When Dobbs happened, immediately our 2020 abortion ban went into effect. That ban was not complete, but it might as well have been because of the lack of understanding that occurred. And then 30 days later, our trigger ban went into effect. The Tennessee trigger ban is 2 pages long and did not have the word exception anywhere in the law. As a doctor, I had to learn legal terms like the difference between good faith medical judgment and objective medical judgment. And doctors should not have to think about these things before we think about the medical situation where our patients need care. We've also seen decrease in interest in trainees coming to Tennessee and other banned states. We need the next generation of OBGYNs to train here and to get the full spectrum of care. And unfortunately, we've seen 10% each year since the decision decrease in applicants to our residency program and residency programs for people wanting to go into OBGYN in banned states. At the same time, providers who are afraid of being criminalized are retiring early or stopping practicing OB, and we're seeing more and more maternity deserts, which further impacts the healthcare for the most vulnerable. We need legislators to stay out of the exam room and judges who clearly don't understand how confusing these laws are to stop interfering with healthcare. And now I'm going to pass on to Maggie Jo Buchanan. Thank you.
Maggie, you're on mute.
I said I was going to be brief on mute, but not that brief. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us, and thank you as well to my fellow speakers for their leadership and their bravery. Um, the actions of this administration, flagrant examples of corruption and defiance of court orders, just to start, can be dizzying, and we're only a few months in. Further, it's worth saying plainly that while debate and, of course, even fierce disagreement over judicial decisions and the records of nominees is a critical part of our democracy, the types of attacks on judges that have been carried out by this administration and its allies, and which have caused unprecedented levels of threats to the judges' safety, is antithetical to that democracy. This simply isn't a stable time for our country. And unfortunately, that fact requires us to evaluate Trump's judicial nominees through that lens. The powerful individuals who spoke before me have made clear the real harm to individuals that judicial decisions can bring. And the president and his allies have made it clear, even more so than during the first Trump administration, that they demand loyalty and strict adherence to a political agenda before a fair and balanced rule of law. Just last week, Trump attacked Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society for essentially recommending judges during his previous term that Trump thinks weren't extreme enough to fully carry out his interests from the bench. Allies of the administration have underscored their desire for loyalty in any nominee as well. I don't think this is posturing. I believe them. And the senators who have the responsibility of evaluating nominees should as well. The overall record of this first slate speaks plainly to the administration's desire to see reproductive rights even further ripped away from women across the country. Full stop. And this is only the first slate. The second, set for consideration on the heel of these nominees, contains the president's former personal attorney and now so-called DOJ hatchet man. We must be clear-eyed on what all of this means, because while the federal judiciary certainly isn't perfect, it is critical that we keep it from being fully twisted into the extension of the MAGA movement that the administration has made clear it desires. Thank you again, and Kelly, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Maggie, and thank you to all of our panelists and to all of the folks who are joining us on Zoom this afternoon. If you have a question for any of the panelists, you can either raise your hand to come off mute in Zoom and ask that question, or you can use the chat or Q&A feature in Zoom to submit that question in writing, and we'll field those as they come in. So again, if you're watching us on Zoom today and you have a question for the panel, please go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom or use the chat and Q&A feature in Zoom to submit that question in writing. I do see a question coming in for Mini. The question is asking, the 3-year anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade is coming up later this month. Can you say more about what these nominees might do on abortion? What might come next?
Yeah, I think it's such a great point. So we are in a country right now where we essentially live in a segregated society. We have states where you can have access to your full bodily autonomy and care. And then you have 21 states that have abortion bans and restrictions where you either cannot get an abortion, it's extremely limited, and it's very dangerous for patients and providers to provide or access care. What we are trying to outline about these judges is it is completely an intentional act by the Trump administration in collusion with some of the most extremist anti-abortion activists in this country to basically stock the courts with young jurists who are ideologically out of sync with the country. The majority of Americans in this country, 8 out of 10 nationwide, higher numbers in many states, are supportive of abortion access right now. They don't want abortion restrictions. They don't want to see limitations on medication abortion. So we expect these judicial noms to uphold some of the most extremist ideologies. And based on their current activism and engagement in the cases we outlined, we expect them to be on the side of restricting access at a time where we have some of the most contentious cases coming up through the federal courts, pitting state versus state, right? So we need to make sure we have the most impartial members of the judiciary in this moment where we're litigating some of the toughest questions in a country where we're divided, and literally patients need to be provided protection when they're leaving a state with a ban to a state where they can have access to care.
Thank you so much, Minnie, and thank you for that question. I do see another question coming in for the panel, and this is coming from Courtney Buble at Law 360. Courtney's asking, what do folks on the panel see as the best way for lawmakers and aligned groups to oppose these noms that are in red states where blue slips can't block them? I don't know, Maggie, if you want to jump in on that, or if anyone else on the panel wants to weigh in on that question about what is there to do here.
Maggie Jo, you want to go?
I'm happy to have you jump in.
Yeah. So the reason why we keep talking about why you've heard many of us say that, Donald Trump won this election by downplaying the role his administration would have on banning abortion. He flat out said he wasn't going to ban abortion, that this wasn't a priority for him. He campaigned that way because he knew how popular abortion access has become in this country in the wake of Dobbs. So the most important and most effective antidote and the most effective opposition we can mount is making sure Americans understand he is breaking his promise. That putting these members onto the court, these individuals onto federal courts is tantamount to laying a foundation for a national abortion ban. That is wildly unpopular. So it's organizing, it's political mobilization, and it's brave folks like Dr. Zeit, I'm sorry, doctor, I'm going to mess it up, Dr. Zeit and Carrie telling their most intimate personal stories that they shouldn't have to do, by the way. It's actually unconscionable that they should have to do that. But we have to make sure Americans understand that Donald Trump and Senate Republicans are poised to break their promises to the American people and go against what the majority of Americans said they do not want them to do, which is lay a pathway for a future abortion ban. And make no mistake, banning medication abortion, blocking patients and providers from crossing state lines to provide care or access care is tantamount to a national abortion ban. So it's organizing. Short answer.
And we always talk about how the organizing is the long game because those who were anti-choice have played the long game.
Right.
When I moved to Tennessee in 2004, we actually had really free access to abortion care. And then in 2014, our state constitution changed, and then bit by bit, the access was taken away. And while everyone thinks it was drastic and it happened in 2022 with Dobbs, it wasn't. And we knew this was happening, but everyone thought we were Chicken Little. I mean, literally at my institution, I have been telling people and warning people and asking people to get involved because when I shout out about abortion access, I'm just a doctor that provides abortion care. And so, of course, I'm going to be shouting, but everybody should be shouting. The doctors who take care of patients with heart disease, with cancer, with lung issues, because this is affecting anybody who can get pregnant. And we are seeing people get sicker, maternal mortality go up. There's so much impact of these laws, the unintended consequences that we understood, but that those people who allowed Dr. Trump to take office and didn't understand these consequences, they need to know that they are hurting people suffering from miscarriages. They are hurting people desiring fertility care. They are hurting people desiring contraceptive services. If we don't do something to stop this, it's going to be just devastating to everybody. And it shouldn't have to be devastating to you for you to care and try to stop this.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you both so much for responding to that question. And thank you, Courtney, for that question. I do see one more question coming in. This one is for Maggie Jo. Maggie Jo, this question is asking Joshua Devine, one of Trump's nominees, has worked for Republican Senator Josh Hawley in several capacities, including in a legal and a policy capacity for the senator. How concerned are you about any potential conflicts of interest as his nomination is considered?
Well, I think, the most important thing is to look at Devine's record, both of the work he carried out when he was practicing law as well as when he was in the Senate. But, I want to look back to something that Dr. Zeit as well as Minnie said. It's exactly right. The most important thing is to focus on these records and to focus on how these records will impact people. We have to keep talking about that because yes, while these, I think it's very clear the agenda that the administration is trying to carry out. Now they're in the hands of the senators, who have a responsibility to protect the rights and well-being of their constituents. So when we talk about nominees being put up in red states and being poised to consider legal questions that we know will continue to harm people, that's what we need to focus on. So just couldn't agree more that making the impact of judges, making the connection between after the president nominates and then the senators have the real responsibility to confirm is
Yeah.
just critical, because this isn't, sometimes I still think, and I that the judges can feel remote, or that a lot of this can feel so many steps removed until you wait. But these are the people that constituents are electing, and those elected officials have the responsibility to make sure that their constituents' rights are protected. And that means voting for judges who will do that.
Excellent. I'm going to put out one last call for questions from the folks on Zoom here before we wrap things up. One last call for anyone on Zoom. If you have a question that you'd like to submit using the Q&A or chat feature, or if you'd like to come off mute, you can raise your hand. All right. Well, seeing none, I just want to thank everyone again for spending time with us this afternoon, for spotlighting what's really at stake here. And please keep an eye out for a release with a link to a recording of this event and my contact information if you are interested in following up with any of the panelists. I am more than happy to facilitate that. I want to thank everyone again for joining us this afternoon. I really appreciate it. Bye, folks.